Hi everyone, welcome to our mid-March bonus episode. In this episode we're going to talk about the things to look out for as autumn starts to creep into the Highlands. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, I thought I would talk a little bit about what's going on now that the summer is coming. Well, we're in the mature end of the summer, beginning of autumn's coming. Nesting has happened, fledglings have fledged. There are young, silly animals around crossing roads and flying into windows and doing all sorts of daft things because they're young and silly. And things are changing in the Highlands. The climate has been very strange this year, but one way and another, life goes on for all the animals. And what happens after the fledglings are fledged, in other words, they're on their own, they get kicked out really by their parents quite a lot. And they have to manage on their own. And so what you often see, and we see this a lot, Floss, when we go bird watching, at this time of year or a little bit later, we see what we call mixed species flocks. MSFs, apparently. Yes. The scientists have actually given it an acronym. Anyhow, these mixed species flocks are usually small birds, and they gang up together, because they're looking for food. They have no territories. Their mum and dad have chucked them out of home, and they have to find new territories. But above all, they have to find food. So they need safety and they need food. If they all get together, they can actually form a really good little group that can benefit one another, depending on the species. So you'll get some species that will flush out flying insects. Anything that's like a fantail. The fantails are very good at flushing out when they spin their tails and spin their flutters and everything. They flush them out of the canopy. Then you've got thornbills, which are insectivorous. Most of these birds that bandy together are insectivorous, funnily enough, but they're all choosing slightly different parts of the habitat of the ecological niches, even on a tree. So you will get some thornbills. One species will be up in the canopy, another at the mid layer, another on the ground. And they will work together. They don't really think of it, I don't think. They're not unionized. But
it's working for them.
It works for them. So, and they can move around in a large flock, and that keeps them safe from big predatory animals that might take them out, like currawongs or some of the raptors and so on and so forth, and of course foxes. So there they are. They're in these mixed flocks, and in there you will also have gleaners from leaf surfaces like pardalots, who only feed on the undersides of leaves. So no competition with the other birds there. And the fact that they're all moving around together, you will actually watch them. We've seen them moving as a sort of an entire group.
Yeah, it's a fabulous experience, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we haven't said so far is you're right that they are almost always insectivores, but people need to be picturing these are the tiny birds. So, yep, the little thornbills, as Lou said, and I've seen red-browed finches in these groups and superb fairy wrens in these groups, all the little tinies, and you can be just out in the bush. Or I actually had a group pass through my garden in the last couple of days. And they're there just for a minute or two, going berserk in one tree, and then they just move on. Yep. It's a really fabulous experience.
And you've got tree creepers, the white-throated tree creeper, who just goes for the bark, and the sitella, who also goes for the bark.
Yeah,
the sitella but moves down the bark when the tree creeper moves up the bark. So they're not competing with one another, and they're actually benefiting one another. And keeping safe together. So it's a wonderful thing, I think, to watch how efficiently they manage to forage during this very tricky time when they haven't really sorted themselves out.
Yeah, they're just learning a skill set.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so keep your eyes peeled for mixed feeding flocks, everyone. They really are a delight of autumn.
I'd like to talk about what's happening in the feather department. I know we're a bit bird-centric at the moment, aren't we? But there it is.
Today.
This is what's happening at this time of year after nesting and before migration. If birds are going to migrate, they lose their feathers. They molt.
Right.
It's been a tough old year, especially if you've been sitting in a nest for like a month with a whole lot of squabbling babies and things. It gets quite stinky in a nest. Food coming in, food going out, that sort of thing. And the feathers, of course, of these beautiful birds get quite damaged one way and another. And there has to be a time where they have to renew the feathers. So you might have actually, at this time of year, have noticed a few feathers in your garden or just walking in the bush.
Yes, in fact, I have, yes.
And sometimes also one of the most common birds we see in the Highlands, I suppose, is when we're driving around are the crows.
Mm-hmm.
You often look up at a crow, always hoping that it's a sparrowhawk or something, more exciting than poor little crows or big crows. And you will see a hole in their wing feathers. That's quite common. A gap.
Yeah.
And so the way these birds actually lose their feathers is they do it in a fairly sequential, systematic way. Mm-hmm. And they usually, not every species is the same, of course, but usually they lose the primary feathers first. They only lose the wing and tail feathers sort of at this time of year. But the primary feathers are the ones, if you like, that go from your elbow to the tip of your fingers.
Once again, Lou is gesturing as to where the primary feathers are, everybody. So I will be able to tell.
So the secondary feathers, just for your knowledge, start with your armpit and go to your elbow. And the primary feathers go from your elbow to the tip of your fingers, right? And it's the primary feathers that get lost. And you will notice that in the crows very often. You'll go, oh, my God, it's got gaps in those big feathers at the very ends. And they actually will lose them from the middle of the primaries out each way. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
There is a sequence
it's organised.
in which it's organised. So you don't lose all your feathers all the time.
But you don't run around like a plucked chook.
No, unless you're a water bird.
Oh, right.
If you're waterfowl, it can be very, very difficult because a lot of water birds actually molt wholesale and cannot fly in autumn.
Okay, so they're more vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable. And they need safe places for the molting to occur. Molting can take 1 to 4 months in some birds. They're quicker, the water birds, but they need islands in areas of water. And they are really, it's a very difficult, vulnerable time for them. Also, 70% of a feather is protein. They're losing protein all the time. So they need to feed on proteinaceous. Thank you. Proteinaceous food. So they need to find food. They've got to have shelter. It's a very, very sort of scary time if you're a water bird. And so I thought that was quite interesting.
Yes,
the
it
way
is.
things
Yes,
were.
thank you. You've taught me things I didn't know. So I'm on a mission. Entomologists, it's time you lifted your game.
Entomologists.
Insect
Fanatics. Scientists.
Yes.
Not fanatics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since we started this podcast, I've learnt the odd thing or two about...
Not etymologists who study words.
No.
Entomologists. Yeah.
Since we've started the podcast, I've learned a little bit about marketing. And it seems to me that insects need some rebranding. As you know, Lou, I'm really keen about insects and I talk about them a lot through spring and summer because that's when we see the most of them. They're really important in the ecosystem and it's really important to encourage people to have insect-attracting gardens for all kinds of reasons. But let's face it, who wants to host some of these insects? Assassin bug, blister beetle, plague soldier beetle, carcass beetle, cockroach, devil's coach horse, darkling beetle, earwig, scorpion, false scorpion, weevils, pod-sucking beetle, spittle beetle, stink beetle, and my personal fave, the cockchafer. Let's face it, they need some new names. So I'm very happy to announce that I had in my garden a giant snowball mealybug. Now, doesn't that just appeal? That's the kind of insect that you want.
Something cuddly.
Yes! So, entomologists, I understand that these names come from the behaviour of these insects, but let's try and improve our sell on these guys. We need to encourage people to have insects, and we need more things called stuff like the giant snowball mealybug. So this little insect, just briefly I'll describe it. I found it on one of my young eucalypts, which have been a little bit under siege, as you'll have heard before in the program. We all know mealybugs from inside the house on our indoor plants, but this was a very, very similar thing, except much larger. It was flat, but overall it was probably close to the size of the tip of my thumb, or at least my thumbnail. And it was really white and fluffy, just like ordinary mealybugs. But this one, it's flattish, and it had orange spots and black stripes. It was really quite
fancy.
Attractive. Yeah. So I thought, well, you're so cute. I'm going to leave you where you are until such time as I see damage to my tree. And so I would check it every day because it's another sapsucker. But the tree came to no harm, and it was there for about a week. It did not move an inch. And I went out one day and it was gone. No evidence whatsoever. So I think somebody found it and munched it. That's my guess.
Well, you'd be kind of vulnerable. Is it what? It's white with black and
It's
orange?
quite noticeable on the green
See,
tree.
Isn't black and orange a colour that says in nature, don't eat me? I'm
Yes,
scary,
it is.
I'm
Yeah.
poisonous.
It was mostly white and mostly fluffy.
It could have
but
just
it had-
died.
It could have just died, but it's gone. But I feel like I was obliged to talk about it because it got such a great name.
And it was on a leaf.
It was on the stem, actually.
Okay. Well, I thought I would just touch on another thing that's happening at this time of year, which is, I don't know about everybody else's garden, but my garden looks a little bit flat flower-wise.
Uh-huh.
It seems like I can't get a lot of colour in there, but what I am getting is a lot of fruit.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So a lot of the fruits that you see in the Highlands are actually, they're exotics. We've talked about this before, cotoneasters and hawthorns and so on and so forth. And we like them. We actually grow them for their fruits because they're bright red or bright orange. And of course, the native birds do feed on these.
Cotton on.
And, you know, that one of the things that you might expect is that native animals will only feed on native plants, but actually that is not the case. And sometimes I think, well, it's kind of interesting. Nothing is straightforward in nature. Everything is kind of complex, and every species behaves differently, and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a mixed story, but basically you will have fruits and seeds now in your garden more than you probably have flowers. I mean, my apples are I just ate my first apple this week and so forth. So this is the season coming up of mellow fruitfulness. And yes, just don't despair. It's all part of nature. And I who like to propagate plants, of course, I am actually rushing around with little bags of... what is that material called? Little bags that have
muslin?
drawstrings. Muslin, yes. And they have little drawstrings. And you can pop them over some of your seeds so that you can catch them when the pods open. And I can start to maybe grow some native seeds, in my case, for next year.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm rushing around with my muslin, as you do.
So a bird that I've been seeing a little bit in my garden just in the last few days, and I expect to see more of, is a bird called a silver eye. These are beautiful, tiny, weeny little birds. I believe they weigh something like 10 grams, which is the same as the weight of two pieces of A4 paper. They're tiny, weeny. They've got a limey head and wings. They're grey underneath, and they've got a very distinctive series of white feathers around their eye, a ring around their eye. So in some places I think they're called white eyes. These are beautiful little birds to look out for. Lou tells me that they love blackberries.
They do. They absolutely adore blackberries. They're naughty, really, because I'm sure they spread them around.
Yes.
Yeah, they absolutely love blackberries. They take all sorts of things. They have a, what was it? Catholic taste.
Yes.
They have Catholic taste.
They certainly like the figs at my place. They get onto those.
Yes.
But the reason they came to mind was that we're seeing them at the moment, and we'll probably see a few more of them because they are beginning to move through our area and further north. And I think that they make a really interesting migration, or movement pattern is probably slightly more accurate. So that my understanding is that the silver eyes in our area will now fly their tiny weeny little 10-gram bodies all the way up beyond the Queensland border. And at the same time, the silver eyes from Tasmania are going to fly up to the highlands. So that a little bit later in the year, as this pattern occurs, you'll notice that the silver eyes that we have normally, they just have a beigey, sort of creamy coloured underneath. But in a couple of months' time, they will have apricot-y colour on their underneath. And they will be the ones from Tasmania.
That's right. That was such a revelation when somebody told me. Basically, it's on the sides of their
the flanks,
sides.
Yeah.
That there's orange.
Yeah.
Normally, silver eyes don't have orange on their. There's a word for that. Flanks.
Yes.
Flanks. But if you see silver eye, you always know it's a silver eye because of the white ring round its eye, and it's got bits of orange on its flanks. It has come from Tasmania across the Bass Strait. I believe they migrate at night.
Yeah.
And all together.
Yeah.
And anyone who's crossed the Bass Strait, even in a boat, we all know what that's like. It must be. It's one hell of a tough gig.
What a
I
job.
reckon.
Yeah. 10
for a
grams.
little bird.
Yeah.
So amazing.
And there are some other birds migrating at the moment, Lou.
Yes. Well, the cuckoos will be gone soon. I still can hear a cole, which of course is a cuckoo, but they will be migrating north, most of them, or somewhere warmer. They won't be staying here in the highlands because we know how cold it can get here. And they will not be the only ones. We have quite a common bird here, which is a fantail. But it's a grey fantail, isn't it? It's black and white, and it stays all year. It's a real stayer. But we also, in the summer months, get rufous fantails occasionally. We get kind of excited, and they are the most beautiful orange and black birds.
They're gorgeous.
And they will be leaving. They don't like the cold. And then we have very close to home Latham's snipe. Latham's
They do a big
snipe.
migration.
They do a massive migration back to Japan. And so a snipe, it's a medium-sized bird. It's not small. It's quite big, and it's got a very long bill. And it likes to live in wet, reedy habitat. During the day, it just hides in high grass. And it feeds at night. It goes out into the sort of mud flat, and it feeds in there using this very long bill to find all sorts of larvae and worms and goodness knows what in the mud flats. And we here in the Highlands have a population of Latham's snipe.
Which is a highly endangered bird, I think.
Highly endangered. And I go out sometimes with a bunch of people during our summer months when they're here to the Botanic Gardens in Bowral. And that wet area there in the middle of the whole land is where they hide during the day. And we just form a line and we do a count. I think we do it 3 times in the warmer seasons and count how many. And this goes into a huge international database. And I think there's one more to go this year, and then they will leave for this massive migration all the way up through China and the Eastern Airways, I think.
Eastern Flyways.
Flyways, they call it, that's right. And some of them will even go up into Russia.
Siberia.
Onto the Russian islands and things like that. And it is just a remarkable migration, and that's where they breed. And so we are so lucky to have these birds. And I have actually seen them in, not just there, but I have seen them in a couple of other wetlands in the Southern Highlands. So always look out. It's always a wetland bird, really.
Yeah, swampy.
Not lakes.
Swampy, reedy.
Swampy, that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So always keep your eye out for them.
Yeah.
Of course, they're very well camouflaged because they're sort of brown and speckledy. And
You don't know till you flush them out.
you
usually.
don't really know.
Yeah.
So that is a magnificent migrant. And then, of course, there's the very well-known migration of the yellow-faced honeyeaters.
Yeah, I was
which we
waiting for you to
love.
come to them. Yeah.
Well, we all love them
Yeah.
because we see them every year and in large numbers, and they fly over your house in March, April, and they are either flying to the coast or they are flying up north, but they are going somewhere
Beyond
warmer.
the Blue Mountains. They're
Yeah.
not stupid.
and nearly always in the morning,
Yeah.
a blue sky, and you hear them before you see them. You hear those
Yes.
twitters because they all keep in touch with each other as they're flying over
It's
your
almost
garden.
like a river, isn't it, through the sky?
Yeah. And you look up and you think, what is that twittering? And then you see them. And they're tiny.
Yes.
They look really tiny.
So you better describe a yellow-faced honeyeater for people who don't know.
Well, it's browny grey, and then it's really, not spectacular looking, but it's got yellow eyeliner,
Yes.
hasn't it?
Yeah.
Just on its face with black on the top and the bottom,
Yeah.
I think.
At our place, we call it the Zorro bird.
Okay. Okay. So you need to look at the face.
Yeah,
But
but
if
as soon
you-
as you see that,
You see,
Eye.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah,
I believe sometimes they migrate with silver eyes and some other species as well. And they all
the
go
white,
together.
one of the white, is it the white-eared honeyeater?
I think so.
Not really sure.
And there can be hundreds going over
Yeah.
at a time. I mean, it's really a spectacle.
Yeah, so it's a good spot to see it. I can't guarantee you'll see it on any given day, but if it's a sunny day, they'll fly over in big groups along the Bong Bong bike track. I see
Right.
them there.
Right.
Whether they're kind of following the river or something, I don't know. But yeah, lots of places that we go at this time of year in the Highlands,
Yeah.
you'll hear them and then look up and see them. And they land very, very briefly, usually high in a tree.
High in a
and
tree
then
for a bit of
move
a
over.
rest.
Yeah, and then move on. Yeah.
Yep, then they move on.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think that they're really, I think they get an early start. It always seems to me. I always notice it's like not early morning, but as soon as the sun's up and it's warm, the sky's blue, that's when they
Off
come.
they go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, keep an eye out for them. They're really interesting.
But fortunately, we do have some stayers.
Yes. We can still go birding in winter.
Our lovely eastern spinebill
Yeah.
is a stayer. And apparently some do migrate, but mostly they stay. And these birds they're nectar feeders. They're honey eaters. They have that tongue that's like a mop, and they can mop up the nectar in the flowers. And believe it or not, during winter, there are quite a lot of bush flowers. There's the Banksias,
Yeah, they're great. At this
the
time of year.
mistletoes, and what seems to be their favourite, I reckon, is those mountain devils.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And the mountain devils, they're sort of an understory shrub in our woodlands. And they put out these lovely trumpets of mostly pink flowers, but they're all sort of bunched up together, and they're tubular. So you need to get that nectar, you've got to have a good size bill that can reach down into the bottom of that tube and get the nectar. And the spinebill is absolutely tailor-made. Or maybe Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the mountain devil is tailor-made for the
Oh, the
spinebill.
spinebill.
But one way and another, they flower, on and off sporadically during
For a
various
long
times
period.
of the year.
Yeah.
But in winter, for a long period, and very often they are
One
one
of
of
the
the
few.
major understory plants that is flowering in the bush. So they're great stayers. The brown thornbills, I think it must be hard for them because they're insectivorous, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the insects get when it's really cold. You know.
Harder to find.
Yeah, the eastern crimson rosellas, they
Yes.
hang around. So we do have stayers.
Yes. And we have the colourful robins.
I was going to say the yellow robins. Some of the other robins migrate in different ways and do different things. The scarlet
right.
robin does something. I remember seeing it in spring, but they said it's passing through to nest in the mountains.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes. So I haven't quite got a handle on. I mean, these migrations are not absolutely, set in concrete.
And often some members of the same group will stay
Stay. As some of the yellow-faced honeyeaters, you hear them calling in midwinter.
throughout the year. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So there are no hard and fast rules.
That's right. It's like so many things in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I've been doing some research. Remember when we went up to Mount Waratah, the fire trail, and we saw Louise is having
Yes,
trouble.
yes. Yes, I remember now.
We saw a young gum sapling and it was crawling with ants, and we couldn't work out what was going on. So I got in touch with one of our friends who knows stuff, Roger, and sent him a little bit of video from the day and said, what's going on here? What are these ants interested in? And he has told me that if I look carefully at the video, I hadn't noticed until he pointed it out, underneath the ants are little creatures called gumtree hoppers. And gumtree hoppers live on eucalypts. They put their eggs on the eucalypt, and then when the eggs hatch, the nymphs come out, and they are the dreaded term sapsuckers. And sapsuckers, they have a long kind of a nose snouty proboscis, it's called.
Rostrum, it's called.
Thank you.
Technically.
Right. Roger did say proboscis.
Oh. All right, maybe.
We'll see. Anyway, they've got this pointy, snouty whatever that they stick into the sapling, and they suck out the sap from the young stems of the tree. They're wanting to grow and turn into proper grown-up gumtree hoppers. So they suck the sap, and there's not a lot of actual true nutritional growing value in the sap, but there is a hell of a lot of sugar. So they don't need the sugar, they're looking for the more nutritious elements in the sap. And so they poop out the sugary, watery stuff at
And
the
there's
other
the
end.
ants ready to
Pick it
up
That's
the
right.
poop.
It's called honeydew, darling.
Oh,
Which I
that sounds a
think's-
lot nicer.
And the ants collect the honeydew and take it back down to their nest for later on. They're creating a little pantry with it. And so the ants are actually protective of the little nymphs. They keep them safe from lady beetles and parasitic wasps.
Keep them alive so they can keep on pooping out delightful
Sugary
honeydew.
That's right. So the ants are referred to as tending the nymphs. And this kind of relationship, Roger tells me, is called a beneficial mutualism. So we'll put up a little bit of footage of that on YouTube and some photos. And I also asked him, you'll see in the photos there are galls on the leaves, which are signs where insects have put eggs as well. And he says those galls aren't related to the gumtree hoppers. They're just something else that's coincidentally put their eggs on the same poor old tree, which is under siege.
How about that?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll see you again in April. Bye.